Hello, Keweenaw Symphony Orchestra, potential violinists. My name is James Brian Wall. For those of you who know me, hi, I'm glad you're planning on returning this coming semester. And if you don't, my name is Brian. I am the concertmaster of the Keweenaw Symphony Orchestra, and I'm just making this video to go over this audition, but I'll also give a little bit of information about auditioning in general, just in case it helps you out. If you're not interested in that information, you can skip ahead until I start talking about the first excerpt here, which is the Tempest by Tchaikovsky, Tempest Overture. So let's dig right into it. Let's talk about what makes a good audition. So the very first thing is I will give, in all of these videos, I will give you a timestamp. It's kind of a working timestamp because, of course, it's going to depend on which video you find. I found a YouTube channel called The Wicked North, oddly enough, that had a lot of these pieces on there. So that's where I got a lot of my timestamps from, because oftentimes they'd have the music there. It's a little easy for me to find. But I highly recommend listening to, of course, the entire work. Because it's one thing to definitely listen to a page of something. It's different to listen to a whole thing and get the context, and you'll probably notice that a lot of these melodies and things repeat over and over again. And so it's good to kind of get the kind of general gist of the pieces. Plus, of course, they're also, especially the Tchaikovsky works, but also all the other pieces by everyone else, Elgar and Dukas, are also very gorgeous works of music. So it's good to listen to all of them. And they're not many of them anyway, are that terribly long, 20 to 30 minutes usually. The Tchaikovsky Symphony is obviously a little bit different, and so are the full Elgar Enigma variations is a little bit longer. But give it a listen. Put it on if you have a like a road trip planned, or if you just have if you have any downtime. Just putting it on, kind of listening to it in the background, maybe stopping and paying attention every once in a while. There's a lot that we can learn from listening in particular, especially, intonation acquisition and all that, and a lot of that's just using your ear. So listening to those pieces, I think, is good, and it'll prepare you for the coming semester. Not just the coming semester, but working with Joel in general, because as you'll probably find out, he's a big Tchaikovsky fan, so as much Tchaikovsky as you can listen to will, of course, prepare you for that quite well. Another thing is, when it comes to the recording process, keep any videos that you can make it all the way through, put like a little star, and then if you want to re-record, go ahead and do that. But make sure you don't delete those. Every once in a while, I've had it so where I'm playing, I do a video, I'm like, you know what, I could probably do a little bit better than that, and then I find out I can't. Or I just have a really bad run of videos. So always keep, if you're like, you know what, that one's passable, keep that one. You can always try to improve, but you want to keep that one just in case things go awry, which sometimes, of course, they do. Let's see, other little tips and tricks. Violin stuff in general, if you're taking this audition and you're taking a look at the music and saying, I think I can do this, then you probably have a lot of the skills necessary anyway, of course, for playing in the Keweenaw Symphony Orchestra in the first violin section, or even the second violin section. The second violin section excerpts are pretty rough as well. But if you are looking for any kind of practice or anything like that, I would just say the main things that I like to talk about with my students is just, of course, there's all the physical stuff, the posture, right? There's all the crazy techniques, different bow strokes and all that kind of stuff, and those are all easy to study kind of individually. But the biggest thing I think to pay attention to the most, especially if you're working with your ear, which of course all of us are, especially on the violin, we don't have nice, easy keys to press. We have to make sure that we can hear it in tune. It is good to listen to lots of music, number one, practicing scales or any kind of shifting exercises, going up and down, really starting slow, listening to the intonation, and then maybe speeding it up a little bit, especially if you're doing the first violin excerpt. Shifting is a big part, of course, of first violin playing. So second violin playing too, of course. You got to make sure that you know your shifts. But that ability to just kind of fly up and down the fingerboard, that really takes some time. So usually what I do personally is I have a nice little warm-up routine. I'll go through my scales, arpeggios, and chords, and all those kind of things, all the double stops, like the octaves and the thirds and all that. And then usually I'll start out slow, and I'll kind of speed them up as I go. And then let's see, and just lots of listening, really. Not just to the pieces that we have here, but any kind of listening. I know Apple just came out with a new app recently called the Apple Classical app. I love it personally, although I know not everybody's a fan of the Apple Music. A lot of people like Spotify. There's plenty of classical music on Spotify and Pandora and things like that as well if you just start listening into it. But, okay, let's go ahead and let's dig into the Tempest. And of course, if you have any questions with anything over the course of any of these videos that I'll be sending out, you can always get a hold of me. I don't want to really give all my information to everybody on YouTube, but if you have to, if you ask Dr. Nevis, he should be able to give you my, at least my email, and then I can give you my phone number and all that. Okay, let's talk about the Tempest. So the main thing is I'm mostly making these videos for first violins because there's a lot more involved, but second violins definitely listen up because a lot of the times, if you notice, we're playing almost the same thing. So it's sometimes good to kind of listen in, even if I'm talking about shifting way up on the fingerboard and stuff like that. Sometimes I'll be talking about intervals and that kind of stuff, so it does pertain to second violins as well. So if you're a second violin auditioning, do also listen up because it could be very helpful, of course. Okay, so if we take a look at the Tempest, number one, this one is about 17 minutes in. I think this was one of those Wicked North videos that I found, and it was about 17 minutes in is when this little section that we get in this excerpt starts. If you notice, it starts kind of slow. We have a very melodic section where first violins are way up on the fingerboard. And I'll play a little bit of that for you here in just a second. Then we go to the Allegro molto section, suddenly very quick after a little grand pause, as you'll see with that fermata over the empty bar that comes right before the Allegro molto. And then as we get down to the Andante non tanto, another thing to really kind of pay attention to is if you listen to the recordings, you'll notice there is a little bit of a slowdown. Da 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 da. So you can, of course, it doesn't say actually to do any kind of ritardando or anything like that. It doesn't even have a rallentando. But, you know, any of those little musical things that you pick up from the recording, of course, add them in because, you know, Dr. Nevis will actually be looking for that, that sense of musicality there. Okay, let's talk a little bit about it. So, Tchaikovsky, as I've talked about before in many of these videos and in many sectionals and things like that, very, very chromatic. So knowing what it sounds like before you start working around and moving around and stuff like that is super duper helpful. Let's talk about the very beginning here. So we start out with this kind of slow, crawly theme that kind of goes way, way, way up on the fingerboard there. And if you take a look at the fingerings I've given, I do actually have a couple of notes, some options basically that you can do. But I do think they work rather well. Of course, if you come up with your own fingering, you're welcome to use your fingering. I'll go ahead and I'll start playing it from the beginning just to give you some of the notes here. This is high. And I'll tell you about the fingering in just a second. So that little spot right there, we gotta go really, really high up, and then it's a bit of a jump down. So if you take a look right at R, look at the third measure of R. I originally had a 1 there because I just think it would be easier to stay up in position entirely. I've been, though, dipping down and using a 2 instead. So in other words, dipping down with a 2, I have to go down a little, and then a 4. That gives us a little bit of a shorter shift down to that D, because that D is really, really far down there. You have to really drop the hand down. Good ways to practice any kind of shift, by the way, is to just find the 2 notes that you're needing to work on there. Like, I'll go ahead and I'll take the B just for fun. Let's see, let me hear that. That's an interval of a 1/6. That's a pretty big shift down, basically. Just taking those 2 notes. and measuring them out. A good way to measure them out always when we're talking about any weird shifts that we have to do. Number one is identify the two notes that we have there, the B and the D in this particular case. And then I would slide up and down just to measure it. So that gets at you at least closer, right? And then eventually practicing it without the slide in there will just help you really ascertain that shift. Okay, the next line there probably doesn't need much explanation, so I'm going to go ahead and skip the little line there. Main thing is for auditions, it sometimes is good to go ahead and wait full measures. You generally don't have to wait for full measures, but we'll kind of leave that up to you. You can usually do like a and then break into the next part, which shows you're recognizing that those 4 measures are there, but you're not going to make the person sit and listen to 4 measures of silence, right? Or you can. I'll leave that up to you. Okay, then after that, we have that little fermata, of course, so kind of show the grand pauses there. It'll also give you a little bit of time to prep, because that next part is really, really fast if you listen to the recording. So those 16th notes, the main thing about them is it's just very chromatic and very quick. So I am going to go ahead and I'm going to play them slow just so that you have them in your ear. If you have any piano skills, this is where that really comes into handy, because when we have those notes that change and they don't 100% make musical sense to the ear, it's not a melody, right? It's kind of a bunch of notes basically. It can really help you kind of really figure out exactly what notes you're trying to play there. I'll go ahead and I'll play it once for you slow so that you can kind of hear what's going on there, and then we'll talk about it. So on and so forth. Okay. Not so challenging going up into position. It's just, make sure you're paying attention to the accidentals and all that. But when we get up there, let's see, especially in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th, 6th measure of the Allegro molto. And if you notice, at the 6th measure, 7th measure are the same. Then the 8th and 9th, and then the 10th and 11th. So luckily, you get a lot of repeated stuff. Let's break into that. So we got the A flat that starts us out. Then we go down, A flat. And I'll go all the way up here so you can really hear it. A flat, G, F sharp, G, F natural, E flat, D, E flat, F, E natural, back to F, G, and then of course we just repeat it from there. But why that's challenging is because the fingers have to really mark out those half steps in particular. All half steps, then you got to move that 2 down a little bit. Now sharp again. So really paying attention to those notes that change in there. In particular, the F, definitely. And then, it looks like actually it's mostly the F. Oh, and the E. The E also changes from a flat to a natural, right? So really paying attention to those, taking them nice and slow. Taking them down an octave. Which can just help you get it in your ear, right? And then when you're way up there, just really making sure to kind of listen in and make sure that those fingers are moving correctly. Let's see. For practice, number 1, metronome, of course. As a music teacher, I pretty much have to say that. I'm required by law. But there's also other ways that you can practice it that isn't just, okay, put on a metronome and try to go as fast as you can. One of my favorite techniques is to do either rhythms or doubles when it comes to these. And you can also segment them a little bit too. And what that really does is instead of sort of thinking about all 10 measures or whatever of that, we're thinking about either one measure or sometimes even just one beat at a time. I'll give a couple of examples of that and then we'll move on and we'll talk about the last section. here's segmenting them up in terms of beat. What that does is it makes it so that you only have to think about 4 notes at a time. But then, of course, you think 4 notes here, then you have to think 4 notes next, and then you have to think about... So sometimes just separating them helps kind of get just those 1 figures in your brain. Then sometimes maybe there's just one that's a little goofy, and then you just need to practice those 4 notes, which is better, I think, than starting from the very beginning and just trying to do it over and over and over again and hoping for the best. Another method is you can do little rhythms. And what that does is we're stopping a little bit. It gives us just enough time to look ahead, right? So that we can kind of really get in the middle of there and kind of figure out what we got to do at any given moment in time. Sometimes you won't need to stop. Other times you'll need it a little bit longer of a stop. Another way is doubles. This is like stopping, except we're not actually stopping moving. We're just taking a little extra time for each note. That also gives you 2 notes to listen to so that you can get it nice and in tune. I'm going to take this one up. And so on and so forth there. So that gives you, like I said, an extra note to listen to for the intonation. You can always start slow and then speed it back up. You can take any of these techniques, put it along with the metronome, of course. Let's see, I'll give an example of that. I'll put the metronome close so I can make sure you guys can hear it. Or if I'm doing double time. So on and so forth, or doubles. So on and so forth. So what that does is it makes it so that we're getting closer to what will eventually, of course, be the full thing at the full speed and all the craziness in there. But you get a little bit of extra time, right? So I think those are good techniques for practicing 16th note sections. Okay, the andante ma non tanto. So when we get to this section, it's basically a repeat with a couple little extra things in there. Probably the most important thing is actually a rhythmic thing at the end here. He starts going into triplets, and at least on my page, it doesn't even tell me where the first triplet is. I just had to guess. Well, not guess. I figured it out because there's 3, 8th notes tied together. But if you look at the 1, 2, 3, third measure from the very end of the excerpt here, we start out with those triplets in there. So I'll go ahead, I'll play the last line after the repeat mark there, just so you can kind of get it in your ear a tiny bit. I gotta figure out what note that is. Triplets. So making sure that you have that rhythm in your ear. Triplet, 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 duple, triplet, duple, 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 duple. You want to definitely broaden those out because that's a big stop moment with that fermata there, of course. In terms of the notes, yeah, they're basically the same as the ones that we had up there with the difference of that weird little repeated section where it seems like we're just kind of repeating the same thing. I think we do that section twice. So I'll go ahead, I'll play the andante non tanto spot, and then we'll leave it there. Here it is. So after the crazy part, hold it, and 2, 3, 1, and. There you go. A little out of tune. I still have to practice this one too. But you get the idea. Everything fortissimo, right? I would maybe start this one, if I can remember correctly from the recording, it starts out a little quiet. So, of course, you can start like a mezzo or so, and then kind of crescendo into that forte, and then just make sure to pay attention to the dynamics, because Tchaikovsky, of course, is big on the dynamics. He's basically Mahler before Mahler. Okay, if you have any questions, like I said, you can get a hold of me. Good luck on your audition.